Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, just wanted to take some time to do a quick review on the 2023 Aprilia RSV4. Of course, this is going to be coming from a Ducati owner's perspective, and I know the Aprilias and Ducatis do get compared a lot. I think because they're both Italian, both make flagship sport bikes and so forth. So there is a lot of comparison there. I wanted to do this review when the bike is completely stock, so I'm getting ready to change the tune, change the exhaust, do all this other stuff to it. So I wanted to do this initial review before I start changing the bike up. As most of you probably know, once you do a tune, start changing all these things, the dynamic of the bike changes quite a bit. It's a pretty big difference when you do that. So I wanted to get this review out of the way while the bike is still stock. At the moment, this bike just has some PPF, it has some radiator guards, and it has an OEM red seat. I don't remember what year RSV4s had this seat. It was certain year RSV4 factories, and some of the Tuonos had it as well. But other than that, completely stock. I will be taking you guys along for a ride with me on the RSV4. But before I do that, just want to go over a few details as far as quality goes and some of the fitment issues that I see on the Aprilia that I don't see on Ducatis. So this is basically a factory fresh RSV4. As you can see, still has all the warning labels on it. Brake rotors still have machining marks on it. It's a fresh bike. So one of the things that I noticed on this bike before I even bought it, I noticed it right away, is a lot of the plastics, it might be hard to see on camera, but a lot of the fairings, a lot of the plastics, they have a lot of like leftover flashing on them. And this is something that, as far as Panigales go, I have never seen something like that on a Ducati Panigale. In these vents, it's a little more apparent, right? You can kind of see, not a huge deal, right? But it is something that it caught my eye right away. I noticed all this right away. And on mine, this may not be all RSV4s, but on mine, so I noticed things like this, right? And on the other side, it actually fits really well. So that same piece on this side fits super nice. And at the tail section, I noticed this also right away before I purchased the bike. This tail section doesn't fit so well. So see, it's nice and flush here, and then it's a little bit pronounced here at the front. It's the same on the other side. In person, it actually looks worse than it's coming out on camera, but you could see it's a little more pronounced towards the front and fits really nice towards the back. At least in my experience, that's something that I've never seen with a Ducati. Ducati, the fit and finish is super nice. You don't find things like that on Ducatis in my experience. Issues like this, it's not the end of the world. I did notice most of these things before I purchased it. It didn't stop me. So I'm just pointing these things out so that way you guys know this has just been my experience. I don't know if this is all RSV4s, of course, but all I can do is just tell you my experience with mine. So you're not trying to say that you're not trying to nitpick everything with Aprilia, but I'm just telling you what I see, and you guys can make your decision if that bothers you enough to pick this over a Ducati. It's important to note as well that even though Aprilia and Ducati are compared very often, Ducatis are quite a bit more expensive than the comparable Aprilia. So I guess it's to be expected that there's going to be some fitment issues. There's going to be some quality issues. I mean, that money has to come from somewhere, right? So basically for me, a Panigale V2, which is technically a middleweight bike, that costs the same as Aprilia's flagship, right? Or just about, right? They're very close in price. If you go to Ducati's flagship, which is the Panigale V4, even the base model, $25,000. So significantly more than the flagship base Aprilia. When you go up in the range, so we're talking Panigale V4S, RSV4 factory, those two bikes are very comparable. Both have electronic suspension, both have forged wheels, flagship engine. The Panigale V4S is significantly more expensive than the RSV4 factory. In fact, the RSV4 factory is actually much closer in price to just the base Panigale V4 as opposed to the Panigale V4S. So that is something to consider. There is a price difference there. So it's kind of unfair to expect Aprilia to have the same fit and finish as a Ducati, right? It's kind of unfair, but I'm just pointing these things out so that way you guys all know and you guys can make your own decision. So let's go ahead and look close at my Panigale, and you could see, let's get really close here. You can see the gaps are really nice. There's no flashing left over on the plastic, right? All the fairings, everything is done really, really nice. You can see all these gaps are perfect. We move to the front, same thing. Very, very nice gaps, very nice fit and finish. Even all the plastic pieces in here, you don't see any leftover flashing material left over. It's just very, very cleanly done. All right, check the gaps there, very nice. Tail section, same thing. Everything fits really nice. Everything is done really, really good on Ducati. So at least in my experience with my examples, quality-wise, the fitment on the Ducatis is much better. However, again, it is a more expensive product. Back to the Aprilia, before I forget, I also noticed there's this. Let me get a little closer. See that fitment issue. When we look at the front fender, again, we see all this flashing on there. And yeah, same goes here. Doesn't fit super good. So again, just pointing it out, just with my example at least. What I want to point out, guys, is some of the quirkiness with the Aprilia. Surprisingly, the electronics are really easy to use. I really like the suite on this Aprilia. However, the controls are a little quirky. The way that they're laid out, they're not horrible or anything like that, but there's definitely some Italian aspects to it, so to speak. I'm gonna go ahead and show you that now. This is the first thing that I want to point out, and I couldn't think of a better way to really demonstrate it. So here we go. This is a 9.5 New Balance shoe. So we could see here, right? Normally when you're positioned to use the rear brake, you're gonna be about there, right? So the strange issue is when you go back to kind of relax, move your feet back on the peg, look where your foot ends up. Even here, if you're not using the brake, if you're kind of just relaxing, look where your foot would end up, right? So a little strange, not the end of the world, but when I first started riding this bike, it was pretty annoying because I felt like I couldn't really put my foot in a place where I'm comfortably positioned because I'm hitting the exhaust. So of course, I'm gonna be changing the exhaust soon, so it's not that big of a deal really. It's not the end of the world. I mean, I still bought the bike, right? But a little bit weird. Now, I want you guys to pay attention to this area here. Okay, watch what happens when I go full lock. Okay, I mean, look at how close that is there. And it kind of sucks because I don't really like the shape of these levers. They feel super bulky. They don't really fit my hand that well, but because of this clearance, there's very few aftermarket levers, if any, that work with this bike that don't require you to clearance the fairing, right? So look at, if you can imagine, right, depending on how you have your hands positioned, when you go to full lock, you hit the fairing, and it's the same way on the other side. So kind of weird. I mean, it hasn't affected me functionally yet, but that is pretty strange, that clearance issue. If anybody knows some aftermarket levers that'll work with this bike that don't require clearancing here, I really appreciate it if you let me know in the comments, because I do want to change these levers to something else. Let's go ahead and check out the clearance on the clutch side. So again, full lock. I mean, look at where you end up, right? Very little clearance there. So those are just some of the things that I've noticed right away on this Aprilia. I wouldn't even call them bad things. They're just things that I think should be pointed out. But I mean, other than that, other than the paint scheme, I think the paint scheme needs a little bit more. It needs a little something. That's why I'm thinking about putting a graphics kit on it. But I really like the aesthetic of this bike. It's really simple. I really like the LED front end. I like the kind of triple headlight look. I love this diplane or splitter look to the front. When you're sitting on the bike, it looks super cool too, because you can see all the aero right in front of you. The TFT dash is really big. It's really easy to see it. And it's also really easy to go through the entire suite. Obviously cruise control is a cool feature as well. I do like that. Also really like the tail section. I think this is really unique and really a cool look. I really like that. I like how they have this red accent on it as well. Has a cool looking taillight, really unique taillight. Surprisingly, as big as this exhaust is, when that exhaust valve opens, this bike sounds pretty good. I think this is one of the better, if not best sounding sport bike that I've heard that has a stock exhaust. So it's huge, but when that valve is open, it sounds really good. And you guys are gonna hear that when we go ahead and take a ride. I really like the aluminum frame as well, this box aluminum frame. I think that's a really cool look. I'm not gonna put carbon covers on it or anything. I like the way it looks as it is. Same goes with the swing arm. I like that raw aluminum, kind of like brushed aluminum look. I think that looks super cool. The wheels, they are cast, so that's unfortunate, but I do like that they did make them in red. So it gives this bike matte black, satin black. To me, it's kind of boring, but I do like that they added that little bit of flair with the red wheels. I haven't messed with this yet, but I really like too that the suspension adjustment is really easy to get to everything. I like that positioning. Same goes for the front. Very easy to get to all that. Stylema calipers, which are great. You guys are probably gonna call me a boomer for this, but the mirrors on this bike are super good. I don't know if it's just maybe my build, but the way they're positioned is excellent and they don't vibrate. So these, and you'll see that when we take this ride, these bikes do vibrate a little bit around 3,000 RPM, but even though you feel that vibration in the engine, the mirrors, obviously they get a little bit of vibration in them, but not much. These mirrors are really good. You can see everything behind you really clearly. I think they're the best motorcycle mirrors I've ever experienced, especially on a sport bike. On my Panigale, the stock mirrors, absolutely useless. They would vibrate and shake so much that you couldn't use them almost at any speed. My Vitpillen, same thing. Basically unusable mirrors. This bike, the mirrors are really, really good. This is probably my favorite part about this bike is there's none of the parts are goofy looking on this bike. Of course, things can be improved. The exhaust is kind of big and stuff like that, but most bikes that you look at, they'll have something goofy about them. The mirrors will be really stupid looking. The rear sets are weird. Maybe the swing arm looks strange. It has a weird seat on it. There's always something about a stock bike that just looks way out of place that needs to be like changed immediately. It'll have really ugly front turn signals or something like that. There'll just be something that's just way out of place. I like on these RSV4s, there's nothing that sticks out immediately that needs to be changed right away. So, of course, I'm gonna change a bunch of things on it, but I like that in stock form, nothing needs to be addressed that very second, right? Even the seat cowl looks good. I mean, everything is nicely done. Even though the fitment is not super good, I like that there's nothing that needs to be changed like immediately on it. Let's go ahead and get to the good part. Let's go ahead and hop on. I'll take you guys for a ride. We'll check out that stock exhaust I was talking about. We'll check out the dash and I'll give you my impressions as we're riding. All right, guys, the Aprilia RSV4. So again, breaking this bike in, so can't rev it too high, can't go too hard on it, but I can lean on it a little bit, as you saw there with the exhaust valve open. Pretty aggressive for a stock exhaust. Of course, you can't compare it to a real aftermarket exhaust for one of these bikes, but what I really like about this stock exhaust is it's loud enough when that valve opens that you still get the flavor of the engine. You still kind of get
right? The engine is really it's the jewel of this bike, right? And with the stock exhaust, with the valve open, you still get to experience that. So I really like that it can kind of hold you over, right? And what I mean by that is, let's say you buy a new RSV4, right? You spent the 20 grand on it, or whatever it was out the door, right? About 20K. Well, everybody's situation is a little bit different, right? You may not have the funds to buy an exhaust and a tune, right? You may not have the $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 to do that right away. And since this exhaust sounds pretty good stock, it'll kind of hold you over. You can still experience the bike. It doesn't sound like a washing machine. It doesn't sound like a, you know, an electric bike or something like that. You still get to experience the focus of this bike, which I really like, right? Also, as you guys have probably noticed here, the quick shifter is very smooth on this bike. I've heard that BMW and Triumph are kind of the kings of the smooth quick shifters. I'm not disputing that or anything, but this one is also really, really smooth. So it's one of those quick shifters where it's kind of happy at all RPMs, right? So a lot of bikes that you ride with quick shifters, there's kind of certain RPMs where they're just happier at, where they just shift smoother. On these bikes, not so. They're pretty much smooth all the time. Another thing I want to mention too, though, is the seat height is very high on these bikes. So the seat height is 33.5 inches. As you guys have seen from my videos, I'm pretty short. I'm 5'5". I have maybe a 30-inch inseam, maybe. So 30-inch inseam, trying to ride a bike with 33.5-inch seat height is, of course, pretty difficult. I have to be super careful about my feet placement. I have to be very, very careful about how I stop. You have to make sure that the bars are pretty much straight. I don't put my foot in a hole or anything like that. So if you're a shorter rider, if you have a short inseam, just keep that in mind, that this bike is pretty tall. However, what really saves it is this bike doesn't have a super wide seat. So I wouldn't say that it's a narrow seat either, but it's not a very wide seat. So that really saves it pretty much. It's not like sitting on an R1 or something like that, where as soon as you sit on an R1, you immediately think, wow, this seat is super wide, right? This bike, not so. It's a lot more narrow. Handling, it handles like it's on rails, which is great. Of course with handling, a lot of it has to do with tire pressure and how the suspension's adjusted and stuff like that, of course. But at least for me, at least in my experience so far, I think that this bike handles better than my Panigale. And it also somehow it rides very smooth also. So on the Panigale, I feel like I get beat up a little bit more. It's not terrible, you know, I could definitely deal with it, but this bike, the ride it's firm, but also very comfortable at the same time, and it handles really good. It feels very, very stable. I think the Panigale is more nimble, but this bike is more stable for sure. So in a road application, right, in a normal riding application, that's great for me, because I don't necessarily need the bike to be super nimble. I'd rather have it be stable. For just, you know, for just mild turns, like something like this, right? Just kind of riding along, just cruising, not riding fast or anything like that, just cruising along. It's very, very stable. Freeway on-ramps, things like that, right? You guys know how I ride. I don't ride super fast. I don't do anything that's crazy dangerous or anything. So for my application, this bike is very, very stable. I really like the handling on this bike. And again, that's without doing any adjustments to the suspension or anything. It's just out of the box. Here, as far as the dash goes, as you guys can see, the TFT display is very easy to read, very intuitive, quite large, but I really like the layout on it. I could just glance at it, and it tells you everything I need to know. Let's see, and this is a pretty open section of road here. Let's open it up just a little bit. I'm gonna just lean on it a little bit, try to find a safe place to do that. Again, I'll mention the mirrors, really, really good. They don't vibrate a lot. They're positioned really well. These are probably the best mirrors that I've experienced on a bike at this point. Let's go ahead and open it up. So, acceleration pretty brisk. Again, that's about, you know, 20% throttle or so, something like that. Shifting at 7,000, maybe a little bit more. So very strong acceleration, a lot of torque, a lot of horsepower. I like that this engine, down low, you can kind of lug the motor. You can kind of have it in too high of a gear and it'll still get moving. You don't need to shift down a bunch of gears to get where you need to go. You don't need to open the throttle way up to get moving, which I really like. You can just kind of give it a little bit of a tip in, a little bit of a lean, and it'll get moving plenty fast. All right, so let's hope we get a green here soon. But what else did I want to mention? Oh, so these bikes, they are a little bit heavy. So Aprilia reports them as 445 pounds wet. I've heard people say that they actually weigh more than that, and I can kind of feel that when I'm moving this bike around. When I move it around in the garage and stuff like that, I can feel that weight. It does feel pretty heavy. However, when you're riding, as soon as you get moving, you don't feel that weight. It doesn't feel especially heavy or anything like that, which I really enjoy. I don't notice that weight when I'm moving. It feels like a lighter, more nimble bike, which is excellent. And I think that aspect kind of contributes to the handling as well, where you get that really stable handling, but it doesn't feel like a bulky big bike, right? You're not reminded that you're on a leader bike, basically, which is great. Clutch, little bit stiff, not too bad, but I think it has to do with it being a cable clutch. But I do notice it is a little bit stiff. You can definitely deal with it, but you can definitely, it's not a deal breaker or anything like that, but I do notice that sometimes that the clutch is a little heavy. So I don't know what it is about the seating position on this bike, but I can ride this bike for long periods of time without getting tired, right? So on a Panigale, for example, I start getting fatigued pretty quick. After about, I don't know, 45 minutes, I start getting ready to want to jump off of it. This bike here, you know, obviously I haven't put a ton of miles on it so far, but you know, 45 minutes, an hour, it's really no big deal. So before I started filming today, I actually was riding around a little bit. So prior to this video, I had already been riding about 30 minutes or so in street scenarios. I hopped on the freeway for a little bit, and I don't feel tired at all. I can keep on riding no problem. So I don't know if it's because of the shape of the tank or whatever, just my build, but this bike is very, very comfortable for me. I can ride it for a long time. So as far as using the bike as like just a motorcycle, so not a race bike or anything like that, this is, at least for me, this is a more appropriate choice than a Panigale. What else, guys? Oh, the wind buffering, really good. I don't know if it's because of the aero or the winglets or whatever, but this bike on the freeway for me is very quiet. So I don't get a lot of wind buffering. And I notice inside my helmet, it's pretty quiet inside, and that, again, maybe that's another reason why I could ride this bike for long periods of time. It's just the way the air flows over the fairings. It's very comfortable for me. So yeah, guys, hope that information helps. Let's go ahead and head back to the garage.
Okay guys, so those are my initial thoughts on the Aprilia RSV4. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I think at this point, I'm super happy with my purchase. Of course, as most of you guys know, I really have my heart set on a Panigale V4. I think at some point I still will get one. But for right now, I'm super happy with this Aprilia. Yes, I've only ridden it about 400 miles or so. So, you know, my opinion could change, my feelings could change, but for right now, I'm really enjoying this thing. The engine is obviously the focus of the motorcycle. especially with an exhaust, right? This is the best sounding motorcycle that there is, right? It just is, right? I think the current generation R1 is a close second, but this is the best sounding motorcycle, right? But I also like that the mannerisms are good enough on these bikes that I could ride this thing for a long time. It just as a normal motorcycle, it works fine for that. And I really, really like that. That's something that the Panigale, at least for me, doesn't have. The Panigale, as soon as you jump on it, it is a race bike, right? But it immediately feels like a race bike. You immediately feel that compromise. The Aprilia, maybe it's just my build, but I just don't feel that, right? I can definitely tell that it's a sport bike. There's obviously more comfortable bikes out there, but I don't immediately feel like, okay, this is just a full-blown race bike, and what am I doing riding this thing on the street? I don't feel that with the Aprilia at all. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. For these small channels, every watch, every like, every subscriber, it does make a difference. So I appreciate all of you watching, tuning in, commenting. I appreciate all that very much, because it's just a small channel. It does take a long time for me to do these videos. I put a lot of effort into them. I know that there's certain things that I can improve, and I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to be as helpful as possible to you guys, but I'm just doing the best I can. So anyways, guys, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining me. See you on the next one.